So the project Inhale actually consists of several different elements. It's textural material, sculptural material, and sound. Let me begin by talking a little bit about the text, which was the beginning of this project. We became interested in scenes of opium smoking, which kind of continuously reoccur in writings of fiction in Iran. And we started to look into this material and realizing that there is a kind of a continuous, ongoing references or depictions of scenes of opium smoking in these writings, starting from the early 20th century until the present. And especially some of these writings depict in very detailed, very kind of minuscule detail these scenes of smoking, which often are situated in a kind of a social gathering which brings together various characters from different class background, different cultural backgrounds, but they all kind of come together around this moment of smoking. But we did not just actually reproduce these writings, these fragments or these passages of opium smoke, but we rewrote them from a third eye perspective. So it's just a kind of a registration of these passages. If you read these passages together, and now there are about 24 of these passages, if you read them together, you see that actually there is a kind of a trajectory of opium smoke going from the early writings to the present, going from one story to another story. And what is also became interesting for us was how these moments, these kind of condensed moments of smoking, is capable of transforming everything that surrounds this moment, from characters, from the conversations, from the architecture, from let's say the sounds even that occur or depicted in these stories. They all kind of absorb in this moment of smoking. They in a way they are kind of equalized. They become instruments of smoking. And from this idea, we actually developed the sculptural elements in this exhibition, which in a way focusing on the kind of the paraphernalia of the smoking, or the smoking devices. In a way, the sculptures are mostly inspired by that. These objects are in a way a kind of an abstraction of what we kind of saw happening in these texts. In a way, what you could say that in these texts, the characters, the architecture, the surrounding, the social dynamics, and everything kind of reached a kind of a moment of vaporization, kind of an equalization, as I was saying. In these sculptural elements, we take this a kind of a step further. We have adopted an algorithmic program which kind of simulates the breath sound that is affected by opium smoke. So it is a kind of a program that calculates from the beginning the amount of opium smoke that enters the lung, and a kind of also calculates a kind of the level of carbon deposition in the lung, and from there it kind of predicts the kind of a deformation within the airways that happens, and as a result the change in the breath sound. So what you see and what you hear in these objects is this kind of abstraction of this kind of an aspect of paraphernalia that I was talking about, but also sound element that is kind of constantly produced by this kind of algorithmic calculation. In a way, the objects go further in the sense of completely moving away from this kind of bodily element that is very, very present in the text. Here there is a kind of complete abstraction of the body, and in a way all that is in the text is kind of transformed or reduced or abstracted to the level of sound, of breath sound. The installation, in fact, is kind of accompanied by film projection, and we have two films that are presented in this setup. One is The Night of Hunchback, which is a 1960s film, early 60s film by an Iranian director, Ghaffari. And in a way, the story of the film kind of connects with the installation, in the sense of it's a story of an actor who chokes to death actually after a performance in a domestic environment, and in a way the body of the dead actor kind of moves through different environments, through different situations, and engages different characters and also different personalities from different social backgrounds. And it's in a way kind of a rechanneling of the body through these kind of different environments and situations that kind of interests us. The other film is called Thicker Than Paint Thinner. That is also a film that I made in 2011, and it's also based on a true story about a drug addict becoming a revolutionary, setting fire to a cinema a few months prior to the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and unintentionally killing actually 400 people. But the story kind of happens, the story of the film happens after this incident, when he's kind of recalling the memory of this incident, and kind of giving a kind of a posthumous testimony to the incident that happened. He himself actually was executed less than a year after the revolution, but the story pretends to be happening after this, a kind of as I said, a posthumous recollection. So what you see basically on the table are some of the texts that I was talking about earlier, some of the rewritings of the fictional writings from Iran, which is also appear together with set of objects that we created, in a way emphasizing this idea of the channeling of the smoke and the opium particles from one text to another. What you see is actually glass tubes containing basically circular elements which are made by modeling clay, but in different colors, suggesting the idea of carbon aerosols moving through these tubes. In a way, they become a kind of a diagrammatic representation of what is happening within and between the texts. The objects and the texts are also presented on a piece of fabric, as you say, and this was the idea of actually giving a sense of material presence to a material sensitivity to the objects.
So this is the 5th edition of this film program called The Sensible Ground, and as in other editions, we try to somehow distance a bit from these traditional setups of screenings towards like more sculptural installations and creating space for the film, specifically in these times of COVID, but even before that most people are used to watch films or their cinematic experiences somehow reduced to these little devices such as laptop. So this kind of physicality of experience, the cinematic experience, was somehow at the core of the film program from the beginning editions, and I'm very happy that it worked despite the past year, to have this occasions to set up this kind of installation, iteration of the work, and bring these works together at the Tàpies Foundation. The film program from beginning started with thoughts around let's say, the relationship with history, because specifically like the recent past, and it was a journey towards how this, how could we think about an intergenerational time and memory, let's say, because it seems that our political struggles are being repeated generation after generation, or even let's say in the Iranian context of like past 100 years, it's been so fast, this kind of moments of desire, hope, or euphoric moments, and then like this kind of repeatedly being in some points, and then as if it's lost moments, and then again and again this happens. So Babak explained about the work of the artist. I mostly maybe focus on how my relationship with the work was, in terms of the relation, bringing this question of our relationship to time, or perception of time, let's say, and which is very much at stake in their thought about the forms of sociality, let's say, that the opium evokes, or this material, how it intervenes in the human history or social history. And then for me also the term chronic was something that I have been thinking a lot recently, also in past editions. And chronic is a phrase which comes from drug culture, is a replacement for marijuana in the North American context, and Elizabeth Freeman, and specifically the queer context of somehow bringing back this idea of how this term chronic could be understood in different ways, not as a kind of the way that we use it is as a pathological concept of a chronic disease, or like a chronic situation which has this kind of form of entrapment, but as a kind of perception of a dilated presence, let's say, which is pretty much the case, because it is as if all these moments of struggle or hope, desire, and failure, these are not like, it is as if they're prematurely called past, and they still somehow have their presence. So it has this kind of poeticness of how could we think of multiple presences at once and break this with this idea of the linear time. So this was somehow the context that I connected to the work, and somehow with the films that also Babak talked about, this dimension of the body, how these relationships we are talking about towards history is embodied physically also.